Greetings, physics fans. Today, we're going to be learning how to build a working electric motor. But before we do that, we have to learn from Dr. Declan how an electric motor works so that we can better understand what we're building. Let's get into it. So, before we build a motor, we need to understand a few concepts of how a motor actually works. The first concept is we need to look at how a loop of wire or an electromagnetic loop of wire would work. We can see the current goes positive to negative, just like this. And to find out what the magnetic field of this electromagnet would be, we use our right hand, and we use a right hand rule where you follow the current with your thumb, and whichever way your fingers wrap is the way the magnetic field would wrap. So if we follow it up, my fingers would wrap around, around, and around. So we can do that in drawing form by putting an X for where it goes in and a dot for where it goes out. Now, this moves on to our next topic of the actual motor itself, which requires two magnets, an electromagnetic loop and a normal north to south magnet. The north to south magnet produces a magnetic field as drawn to the right, and as we know from the previous concept, that the electromagnet is producing a field with X's on the inside and dots on the outside. Now, how does this actually make it spin though? Well, the electromagnetic fields create a force on each other, which, as you know, a force is the movement of objects. So, to find this force, we can use another right-hand rule to follow the current with our hand, and we use our fingers to go in the direction of the magnetic field of the normal magnet. So, if we follow this up, we can see that our fingers would go this way, and our thumb then points into the board, and our thumb is the direction of that force. So to draw that, we would put an X for the force going in, and then if we see the loop goes horizontal here, but because it's parallel with the magnetic field of the normal magnet, there is no force here. Same thing down at the bottom. And then lastly, if the current is going down, and our fingers would then go to the right, that means the force would come out of the board. So we put a dot. And that means the whole thing is going to rotate like this into the board with going in and then out, in and out. But there's a problem. If we look here, once it rotates 180 degrees, the positive and negatives are switched because they're anchored to the entire movement of the motor. And this means as soon as they're switched, it's just going to oscillate back and forth, because if it's going in here and out here, but over here it's going to go in and then out, meaning it'll just go back and forth, back and forth. But there's an easy fix to this. If we anchor the positive and negatives to, say, two pieces of metal, and then we use a brush system where the two wire ends just touch the positive and negative, it'll mean every 180 degrees, it's going to spin another 180 degrees, or 360.
Alright guys, let's get into the actual build here. We're going to need some materials to get started. We're going to need a block of wood, we're going to need a skewer, we're going to need a cork, we're going to need 2 screws, we're going to need 2 eyelets with screw ends, and a coil of wire. You might need some tools like a hammer. In my case, I'll be using a 1 kilogram weight, and you may need wire strippers and sandpaper, but I did that stuff before this video, so they're not included. Alright, let's get into the actual build now. The first step is to take your eyelets and screw them in around the middle of the block at both ends of the block. And you want these to be about the same height, and you don't want them too low, because when the motor starts to spin, if they're too low, the motor could get caught. Alright, now let's build the actual motor. To do this, we're going to take our cork and turn it so that it is horizontal, like shown on screen, and then we're going to wrap our wire around this cork, making sure to leave 2 ends of the wire sticking out so that we can use the brush system as talked about earlier by Dr. Declan. Now, we're going to take our skewer and stick it right through the middle of that cork so that we can place it into the eyelets and we can have a spinning motor. Finally, we're going to place our 2 nails just before the ends of the wires so that as it spins, it'll continuously brush against the nail. And you want to hammer them in with your hammer, or in my case, the 1 kilogram weight. And that's it, you're done. You have a finished motor. Now all you need is a charge and a magnet, and it'll start spinning. As you guys can see, the motor works perfectly, and it can spin infinitely until the current or the magnet is removed. Now, If you enjoyed this build, make sure to like and subscribe so you stay posted on future projects. And remember guys, stay crafty.